Hi there, Steve Whitty here. It's time for another video. I hope everybody's well and the summer's going well for you. It's another one of these post-lockdown what have I been buying videos. I'm slowly kept working my way through it, so it's another 10 albums that I'm going to show you. I will warn you that they are, for want of a better phrase, varied. But I think hopefully there's something for everyone who watch the video to enjoy and that might like. So without further ado, let's start and show the first record. School's Out by Alice Cooper. Finally got hold of a copy, and this doesn't have the paper panties in there. The fifth album, which was released in 1972, best known title track in the UK, which was a #1 hit single. This sort of catapulted the band, as it was then Alice Cooper the band, into major stardom. Yeah, I mean it's really quite. I found elements as almost like show tunes in this, as well as good hard rocking stuff. Obviously, "School's Out" is the most famous song on here. The Paper Panties, originally came. Album originally came with the panties in. I've got to be careful how I do this. There you go, in the album like so. This is an original pressing. They discontinued the panties partly because it turned out they were flammable. So future pressings didn't include them. The actual desk itself is still around. It's on display in the Hard Rock Cafe in Las Vegas. So if you ever go to Vegas, you can actually see this desk. I'm glad I've got this album. It's one of those albums that should be in most 70s fans of 70s rock collection. Next album is Gazus by Gong. This was released in 1976 and was the band's 7th album. By this time, David Allen and Jill Smythe had left the band and Steve Hillage was no longer involved. This is album is as far removed as the psych sort of hippie version of Gong as it was. This is pretty much Pierre Moulin's Gong, and it's sort of like the first album where he was the leader. It features Alan Holdsworth on guitar, and from the sound of that, if you know of either of them, this is very much a jazz, avant-garde, jazz fusion type of album. Not a bad album all the same. It's worth checking out if you are a fan of Gong. The title is French. It's a French word. It literally means fizzy, effervescent. So it's and in a way it perfectly describes the actual music on the album. It's quite an upbeat album for all it is. It's like a jazz album. It's sparkling. Might be even another word they use to describe Gazus. Yeah, it's actually really good album. Gong, it's knowing where to dip your feet in, because there are various incarnations, various types of music that the band played, but well worth checking out. I'm glad I've picked this up, and it's in really good nick as well. As I've probably mentioned in previous videos, I'm coming up to 5 years in the VC, and when I started watching VC videos, one album that I saw a lot of, particularly from the guys across the pond, was this album, James Gang. James Gang Rides Again, or sometimes just known as Rides Again. The band's second album, released in 1970. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know really much about the James Gang. About the band, all I know is Joe Walsh was the guitar player at that time. So when I saw this copy in the shop, I thought, I'm going to take a punt on it. see what it's about, and it's really good, enjoyable, good rocking album of that ilk. You probably may have guessed that 70s is probably where my heart musically lays, though I do buy from other periods. This is released on ABC through Polydor in the UK. This is a Canadian pressing. Some really good tracks on here. Some really good tracks on here. One track, The Bomber, it got here. It features two bits here: Closet Queen and Cast Your Fate to the Wind. Now, original pressings had a third part, which was a bit of Ravel's Bolero, and Ravel's estate sort of threatened to sue the band and ABC label if they didn't remove it. So it was removed. If you buy the CD reissue, you do get to hear that now. I think things got ironed out so that it could be used. But yeah, this is again good rocking record. It's, if you get a chance to stream it and have a listen to it, if you haven't heard it, it's worth checking out. Next album, it's Styx. This is Caught in the Act, double live album released in 1984. It's the band's first double live album. It just features one new track on here, Music Time, which opens the album. This was recorded during this Kilroy Was Here tour, and this would be the final album for some time. Tommy Shaw, the band at the back, left the band shortly after, and the band didn't replace. They just went on a bit of a hiatus, and I think it was a good 15 years before they got back together. And I don't think the drummer was fit enough. John Panosso, I don't know how you pronounce it. He sadly died in the mid-90s, just before the band, just as the band were getting back together. It's just a bog standard live album. You know, you could hear the bands. You could almost hear the cigarette lighters light up for Babe when that gets played. That was the big hit in the UK, and I think the biggest hit in the US. Some good songs. Styx, particularly the early stuff, very progressive. It's well worth checking out. I've got a few of their albums, and there are a few more albums I need to sort of complete that era. Well worth checking out if you haven't heard it. See, a couple of months ago, I did a video with James Griffiths about The Move, ELO, Roy Wood, which was very well received, and again, thank you all for watching and commenting on that. I actually went out and got myself a copy of Boulders, which Roy Wood put out. It was released in 1973 on the Harvest label, and was his first solo album. This is sort of in between ELO. It feels like it's in between ELO and Wizard. However, delving into this album, I found this album was recorded between 1969 and 1971, while very much still involved with the Move. And it was sort of like he was having a creative break from the band. This is probably as nearest, damn it, as anyone could say this as a solo album. There are 20 instruments on this album. 19 of them were played by Wood. Only the harmonium was not. He didn't play on it. And if I open up the gate, you can see Roy Wood play. You know, the various instruments he plays. This album, it's a wonderful album. it's a mixture of all styles. You've got bluegrass, experimental, classical, psychedelia, rock and roll, art rock, country. Um, it's in a way. I think James said it in the video. It's sort of like could be a precursor to what his vision of Electric Light Orchestra was going to be. However, why wasn't it released earlier until 1973? Literally because of Roy Wood being involved with the move ELO, and the manager Don Harden was very insistent that nothing should get in the way of this. When released, it reached number 15 in the chart, and when I say it's a solo album, Roy Wood even did the cover as well. So there's Roy noodling on the cello there. Something a little bit different from Roy Wood. It's Bon Jovi, and it's the debut album released in 1984. What you get to listen when you listen to this is you do get to pick up on the promise of what the band were at that time. There's John Bon Jovi, and there's the band, rest of the band there. It was produced by his cousin, or co-produced by Lance Quinn and his cousin Tony Bon Jovi, who owned, I believe it was the Power Station Studios. He was a co-owner of that, and John got a job in there in 1980, and he used that experience to get plump his demos around, and eventually he got taken on and he sorted the band out, which would become Bon Jovi. Runaway is probably the best known song on here, the opening track. So as it is, it's an 80s rock album. It does hint of the promise of what's to come. I think John Bon Jovi himself said in an interview in 2007, he didn't think the band were that good, but the one thing he did have was that Tico Torres could keep time properly, and that helped. Probably helped them get into that third album, Slippery and Wet, where the band found their groove and everything then started to take off. The next two records I'm going to show is probably where whatever credibility I have might take a bit of a hit. And the first one, for example, Showaddy Waddy's Greatest Hits, 1976 to 1978. This is staple of charity shops, thrift stores, wherever in the UK. Get this quite cheap. Showaddy Waddy in the late 70s were immensely successful. How they started, they'd appeared on a talent show that used to be on in the UK called New Faces, which was effectively acts that had done the clubs, did gigging and whatever. There's all sorts of acts, musicians, comedians, singers, novelty acts. They did the working men's clubs, and the only premise for them to get on New Faces was the fact they'd never appeared on television before. And Showaddy Waddy came second, I think, but they got picked up, I think, on the Bell label, and from there took on. The drummer there, Romeo Challoner, actually drummed in a later version of Black Widow before he joining Showaddy Waddy. And in the UK in the 70s, there was quite a bit of nostalgia for old rock and roll, the Teddy Boy image. So that's what they sold themselves on. They did, but effectively were a rock and roll covers band. But they were incredibly successful. And I think it's when I looked into this, on the tracks on here, so you've got on here Pretty Little Angel Eyes. That was a number 5 hit. Dancing Party, number 4. Little Bit of Soap, number 5. You've got that's another one. You've Got What It Takes, number 2. I Wonder Why was number 2. It doesn't include their big number 1 hit, Under the Moon of Love. I think that's on the early edition. But yeah, incredibly successful up to that point. And then from 79, their career drift off. I mean, they're still gigging now. I think only Challoner remains. in. I think Dave Bartram now the singer acts as the manager. But yeah, you may mock, but they were incredibly successful at the time. And yes, sometimes it's good to wallow in our youth. Sometimes it's a nice comfort place to come back. And the reason I've said that is I'm showing this. This book picked up in a charity shop. This is Rainbow. Rainbow was a television program, kids television program that ran. It ran for a long time, from 1972 to about 1999. You got your characters here, so mainly Bungle, Zippy, and George the Hippo. But it's the songs, and the band Telltale were sort of like the feature group on the show from 72 to 74. This album itself came out in 1973 on the Music for Pleasure label, and it's actually a lot of children's programs around that period, sort of on the folk side of things. You know, if you hear the title track, you could have that on a folk rock album of that period. And I can think of, like, there was another there was a preschool children's program called Play School that was on the BBC, and one of the presenters was Tony Arthur herself, was a respected folk singer that did the clubs. So the influence of folk music was floating around in children's programs. Why have I picked it up? As I said, it's sometimes good to wallow in nostalgia. It is, but basically songs aimed at kids, but I'm still a big kid at heart. Getting back on track, this is Level 42's debut album. Sleeves a bit, seen better days. Record plays good. Released in 1981, Level 42, I think, from the Isle of Wight. And were part of what was known as sort of like a virgin jazz funk scene that was floating around Britain in the early 80s. I think of bands like Freeze, Light the World, two acts that come to mind. Mark King probably was the de facto leader, but he was the bass player. And you got Mike Lindrup there, the sort of like the band. Mark King was actually a drummer, and he had to sell his drums while gigging abroad to pay for a ticket home. So down on his luck, he was working in a music shop, and he started picking up the bass, learned to play the bass, and during that time there were a lot of touring musicians coming in, particularly of the jazz funk scene, and slapping the bass. So he watched them how they did it, and he developed his own unique style. He's a very good bass player, Mark King. As I say, it's really is a good starter album. Love Games was the minor hits here. It was their sort of breakthrough. They went on in the 80s particularly big, got more poppyfied, but very successful. Final album I'm going to show you today is Sinead O'Connor's The Lion and the Cobra, which was her first album, released in 1987. This is the UK cover. I think in the US and Canada they had a slightly different cover, because she looks quite fierce on there, and I think they did a different cover which gave it a softer image. Little did they know. Breakthrough single, how I got into was the track Mandinka was a top 20 hit in the UK. She had a striking image. The shaven-headed lady. There weren't many around in the late 80s. So yes, really was excellent, and the music's excellent as well. I have mentioned before that Sinead O'Connor, if she sings my head's not in a good place, it reduces me to a quivering wreck. Troy was the lead single, which was a hit in Ireland and a hit, I think, in Europe. The actual title track comes from the Bible, from Psalm 91:13. You will tread upon the lion and the cobra. That's where the title comes from. Yes, and I think it is. It's on the back of the cover as well. Really pleased to have found this album. I know she has her critics. I think her image, her persona puts some people off, but as I say, she's got one of those voices that's just I don't hear it. I could not get enough of. So BC, there you go. Those are the 10 albums. Hope they are different. I've got plenty more to show, so I look forward to showing those. Yes, if you're new to the channel and you like what you see, click on the subscribe button. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Love the interaction. And feel free to comment. I will get back to you. I've been quite good on that as well. So while you get up to VC, make sure you do it safely. So take care, look after yourselves, keep spinning, but more importantly, keep on smiling.